Good afternoon. My name's Ryan from Askreddit Tells, and today we're going to be looking at some of the top stories from r/maliciouscompliance. But before we do, I want to make sure you're subscribed. Also, make sure you hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date on all the latest videos. Military spouse accuses me of cheating on my husband with my husband. I've been living in Japan for a little over 2 years with my husband. He was born here and we decided to move to his hometown. It's a small city, but there's enough to do without getting bored. I'd describe us as an AMWF couple. Asian man, white female, for those who don't know. It's not something so common in Western companies, and it can feel like we're some rare shiny Pokemon. As AMWF in rural Japan, lots of staring, occasional secret pictures, or even small chats if an old lady is brave enough to approach us. It can feel uncomfortable eating at a restaurant because kids will turn around in their seat and stare at us the whole time with an open fish mouth. Coincidentally, there's a small US military base located in this city. The closer you are to downtown, the more American families you see. I'm constantly mistaken for being military by Americans and Japanese, which is understandable. Besides myself, I know only 5 other interracial marriages here. It's always locals who ask about my American husband when I'm out alone, which I respond in Japanese, Watashi no oto wa Nihonjin desu koko ni sunde imasu. I hope I pronounced that right. My husband is Japanese and I live here, or something along those lines. Americans never ask about my marriage as they assume my spouse is American. When we're together in public, we do abnormal couple behavior such as holding hands. No couples rarely hands hold in public, let alone say I love you. We don't go downtown too often since it's all pay to park and it's a nightmare to find a place. It's beautiful and warm day for the first time in months, but we decided to battle for a spot and walk around the shops. The crowd was heavy since the weather was great and the winter was ending. The season for new American families to move here just finished, so I'm sure this was many people's first time to leisurely walk and shop outside. We find a parking spot and made our way to the outside of the shops. Of course, we're holding hands and casually talking and laughing. Wow! I hear from this American woman about 10 feet behind us. You should know that a Japanese stereotype against Americans is that we're rudely and obnoxiously loud, and that this wow was loud enough for me to turn my head around at the noise. She was with 2 other moms who had like 3 kids. They were staring at me, but perhaps we just accidentally had eye contact at the right time. Seriously? Another little homewrecker is doing this in public? Chill, woman. You're so loud even I can hear you. We find a table nearby at the Starbucks outside. We're enjoying our drinks when the same group of women approached us with their strollers in tow. They definitely let some sort of purpose with something to say to us. Let's call her Anna, woman in Japanese. Anna, or probably Ona. Excuse me, but you need to keep whatever you're doing in your messed up home. Doing that in public in front of families to see is disgusting and immoral. My kids don't need to see such a bad display of marriage. I'm so confused, as was my husband, who can speak English, who knew drinking coffee outside was a crime against humanity in marriage. I'm sorry, what did we do? You know exactly what you're doing, she points to my wedding ring. No, I don't. Good Lord, does your husband know about this? Is he on a ship right now? That's so like a dependopotamus. Her friends laugh. In case you don't speak military, a dependopotamus is slang for a military wife who stays at home all day, doesn't clean, use their spouse as an ATM, and looks like Jabba the Hutt. It dawns on me. She thinks I'm a military spouse and I'm cheating on my American husband. I started laughing because she's suggesting I'm cheating on my husband with my husband. This is my spouse. I'm actually not a part of the military community and have a Japanese visa. Anna looks at my significant other up and down. The 2 women behind her apologize, but the Anna didn't believe it. Anna, no one would voluntarily want to live in this little town. Nice lie, but you're not representing the military community. You make all of us wives look like whores. Who's your husband and what's his rank? Also, I need to your dependent ID. My husband is a high rank, so he'll make sure your husband's aware of your infidelity. She pulls out her phone to probably type my response. I'm offended since this is actually a nice place to live and very open to foreigners. Look, my husband's name is Ray. Not his real name, I don't want to reveal personal info. And he's sitting right here. I'm not going to show you my military ID since I don't have one. And you're not the police. As proof, you can obviously see our wedding bands match. And here's a picture. I show her my phone screen, which is of us in a traditional Japanese clothes on our wedding day. Her eyes became huge at the picture. Her two friends and their spawn have already started walking away. Why are you in a relationship with him? You should be in a normal relationship and starting a family with American kids. She says some other statements which I'd consider racist against the Asian race. It's so ironic because we are in Japan and she's fussing about me being married to a Japanese man. My husband has been quiet throughout the whole exchange and says to me we should go. I agree and stood up. Stop. The things you're saying are extremely offensive. I was part of the military community myself some years ago, and what you're doing is against spousal conduct. She smirked. Go ahead and tell people what I did then. My high-ranking husband is an E7, and everything will be swept under the rug no matter what happens. You can't touch me. So that's what I did. No, this is a small military community. Someone does something minor, and it's talked about between wives and chickens. Later that day, I run into my friend who works on the base, and she's well known in the community for being one of the main event coordinators. I don't miss this chance to comply with Anna's demand and demand my friend about the exchange and how it made my husband extremely uncomfortable with her remarks. She asked me if this person looked like so-and-so, which I said yes. My friend rolls her eyes. She just arrived a couple of months ago and is already causing problems with rumors and drama. Looks like we have a racist, too. I'll make sure what she said is passed on. It's been half a year later, and I didn't hear anything about Anna again since. I distanced myself from making military friends here. I've only been in my new city for a little over 2 years and experienced more drama from military families than I had my whole high school career. That is, until now. Last week, I ran into my friends who's getting ready to leave back to the U.S. We had a little discussion about her moving into my family planning and dropped a bombshell. Do you remember Anna, who accused you of cheating on your non-existent military spouse and called your husband a racist name? Of course, I haven't heard anything from her since. Well, I mentioned we're already having problems with her not long after she got here. I told my boss that there's a person who was bothering and threatening civilians and asking for IDs, which isn't allowed for someone with her status. My boss was extremely interested after I mentioned her name because Anna was scheduled for an interview in my department. I suggested we have a look at her social media accounts from her past behavior because we don't tolerate racism. It was easy to find her Twitter and Facebook, particularly Facebook since we have many mutual friends. Her SNS was shocking. While she set her Facebook to private, her Twitter was littered with malicious tweets and retweets. This included racism, slang for many nationalities, colorful language, and using her husband's military rank to bully others. She made it very clear that she wants to see her current city burned to the ground, and why would anyone want to learn Japanese since it sounds terrible? We printed some of the more extreme things she posted and still invited her to the interview. Oh, and did I mention my boss is Japanese? So she comes into the interview, which I was a part of. I asked 3 good things about her, which is, she says, dependent, gets things done, and friendly. My boss just looks at her for a second before he pulls out her tweets and asks her to explain how she can friendly serve the local community if she hates it so much. Anna was floored and said someone hacked into her account, despite there being at least 3 years of slanderous tweets. We thanked her for coming in and said we can't accept an employee with this conduct. As far as I know, she's still not working because some spouses found her Twitter not long after the interview and was shared in all departments. No one will touch her application now. So all of this was discovered because I told you about her accusations? Yes. Oh, and she's kind of an outcast socially right now because she cheated on her husband a couple months ago. There you have it, folks. Because one person couldn't mind their own business, they lost a potential job, had their social media exposed. Super ironic since she became the dependopotamus and the adulterer, the same thing she was accusing me of. Edit, since some posts say it's fake because my writing sucks, this is how I tell my stories online. The day I was hired and fired by a law firm. So this is about 5 years ago. I worked as a chef at a bakery. It was my job to make everything but the baked goods. Every morning, the baker and I would walk in at about 4 a.m. and knock out all the food needed for the day. This would leave me ready to go home around 10 a.m. or so. This puts us at the perfect time to deliver online orders. It was common for companies or other entities to place large catering orders with us. The baker and I would split them down the middle and deliver them on our way home. Then delivery in question was for Bob, Dick, and Harry, attorneys at law. I have never delivered to BD&H before, but they were a regular of sorts. Every financial quarter they would hold a huge meeting. This meeting would require roughly $700 of bagels and bagel accessories. This spread included 8 dozen bagels, all 10 of our flavors of cream cheese, pastries, brownies, and enough coffee to power a college dorm through finals week. My passenger seat, entire back seat, and entire trunk are filled with food. Now BD&H is located on the 9th floor of a commercial skyscraper deep in an industrial complex downtown. Parking was non-existent. There were meters outside the building, but I knew I would need to close to 10 trips to deliver all the food, and didn't have a lot of change on me. Company policy was to just pay whatever fines I needed to park and then turn in my receipts. The money would end up on my next paycheck. So the building has its own parking garage. So I pull in. The security guard, let's call him Sam, stops me and says that the parking garage is for employees only. I happily show him my delivery invoice and offer him a bribery bagel. Never leave the store without at least 2. Sam refuses the bagel and says I can park at one of the guest spots on the bottom floor. The fee is $5 for 30 minutes, minimum $10. I thank him and head to the bottom floor of the garage. So there are a total of 6 guest parking spaces. Just 6. All of them are taken. I head back up to talk to Sam when I see an open parking spot reserved for Bob, Dick, and Harry, attorneys at law. There are cars in every spot, with many spots being reserved for employees by name. The last spot is empty and reserved for guest of BD&H. Perfect. I pull on in. I grab the most important part of the delivery, the coffee, and head to the stairwell. I get into the elevator and hit the button for floor 9. The elevator asks for my employee ID card. Well, crud. So I try for the lobby. That works. From there, it's 9 flights of stairs until I'm outside the law firm of Bob, Dick, and Harry. After introducing myself, I'm shown the room where the meeting will take place. A table is set aside for me. I set down the coffee and head for trip number 2. That is when I see Sam talking to the receptionist. He runs over and starts shouting at me. I'm putting a boot on your effing car. I told you to park in guest on the bottom floor. I don't get a word in before he launches into a speech about security and how he'd be hurting his building or people. That is when a very well-dressed man walks over. It so happens to be Bob, the Bob of Bob, Dick, and Harry's. Bob asks what the problem, and soon the two are arguing. OP is delivering food for my meeting. He's allowed to use my parking spots. Those parking spots belong to the building. You're leasing them like you lease this floor. I am the one who says who can park there. He isn't an employee, so he isn't parking. Then I am making him an employee. You can't do that. You know what? You're right. Harry, get over here. Harry walks over here with an amused look on his face. Harry here is the head of our HR department. Harry, hire this boy. Harry pulls out a piece of paper and scribbles, OP is now a member of Bob, Dick, and Harry's, and signs it, then asks me to sign as well. I do so. Bob reaches over the receptionist, who's already grabbing some things. Here's your employee badge and your parking permit, and your elevator keycard. Now please do have the job I hired you to do, and deliver my bagels. Sam looks on utter fury as I ride the elevator down to my car. 7 sweet elevator rides later, all the food is delivered. Bob and Harry meet me at the table. OP, you've made great strides in this company and I'm proud of your work, but I feel it's time for us to part ways. Here's your final check. Bob then hands me a crisp $50 bill. Harry, and your severance package, now please be sure to return your badge and card on the way out. Harry hands me a 20 and sends me on my way. The receptionist is sure to validate the parking ticket that Sam gave me, and I head on out. On the way out, Sam grins at me and asks for my ticket. I place it on the machine in his station. It sees the validation I got and lets me out for free. Sam glares at me as I drive off into the late morning sun. Too long didn't read? Security guard said I didn't work here, so I can't park here. Client pretends to hire me to get around the rules. Never argue with lawyers. And that about does it for r/malicious compliance. Did you like it? Make sure to check out some of our other stuff and even subscribe. Also, make sure to share this video with your friends and family to help keep the channel going. As always, my name's Ryan from Askreddit Tells, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.